Good afternoon, and welcome to the Center for Healthy Sex monthly webinar based on Mirror of Intimacy. Today's topic on Monday, April 3rd is freedom. So I want to remind all of you that are listening now that you can text me in the text box to your left any questions that you have, and I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. About midway through the webinar, we'll answer or open the phone lines, not phone lines, but just open the lines in case somebody wants to speak directly and has questions. Also a reminder that if you have any issues around sex, love, sexual desire, dysfunction, sexuality, compulsivity, you're welcome to call our phone line at 310-843-9902, and our intake counselors are standing by to answer any questions you may have or direct you to resources in your area. All right, so let's start with the topic of freedom, which I think is a nice topic for this spring day. Josh Whedon says freedom is not freedom from connection. And I think that's an interesting statement. We often think of freedom as a complete lack of constriction or a lack of something, as opposed to how freedom can come from connection or commitment, as it were. So sometimes I think about toddlers, and if you really let them run free, they can get very, very agitated and scared and even lost. So that's not a freedom for them. But if you put them in a contained environment like a playpen and they have all their things with them, they can feel incredibly free to play in that contained environment. So there's a paradox in freedom, like most things in life. And I think it'd be useful to think about that today as we have this conversation about what freedom is and what freedom is in relationship with each other. So as I said, we usually define freedom as an absence of something. And one of the definitions of freedom is beyond the reach of oppression or judgment, inhibition, or pain. And certainly none of us want to be constricted in any way, corralled, imprisoned, oppressed, or judged. And we can't help that depending on the context we're living in, because there's so many different sort of subcultures of humanity, if you will, today, whether it's being female or African American or transgender or have a particular religious preference. All of us feel the reaches of oppression or judgment from others. And do we let that inhibit us because it's so painful, or do we find ways to work with it, maybe even around it? And then what about the oppression or judgment we can feel in our own relationships? So we can properly view or reframe freedom as a positive enactment, a move towards life and a search to connect of one's own free will. And what does it mean to have free will? Can we really do anything we want whenever we want? And again, there's one of the paradoxes, because we don't live in an anarchistic society. You can't freely do whatever you want because you may harm somebody else. You may create, great pain to somebody else. So where are your lines around what freedom really means to you? But free will is a little bit different, because we have the luxury still in our country to be able to move about freely, to have conversations freely, to choose whatever we want to do with our lives. From the sublime to the ridiculous, you can really make the opportunity as best you can to choose whatever you want and go for that and go after that. And that's an extraordinary internal freedom. So freedom to do, freedom to feel, to love, to have experiences, to fulfill our true potential is really what freedom is. And I think love can be an incredible freeing power. Sometimes when people aren't in love relationships, they can feel less free. They can feel stuck or alone or not able to meet their potential in their life. And again, paradoxically, in a relationship, we can feel deeply inspired by our partner. We can feel that we have permission to try things because we have someone championing us in a way that we never had before. So looking at freedom in the context of a love relationship has us looking at and examining the question of whether our relationship supports our freedom, inspires us to grow, champions us, or restricts our freedom in that it becomes judgmental or oppressive or insulting in some way. Peter says, freedom to me means that I don't have to march to the drummer of my past trauma and conditioning. That's beautiful. Nice to hear from you also, Peter. And that's a wonderful thought from you that, yes, when we are unburdened by the shackles of our past, the trauma that we carried around, that's really when we can start to hit our full potential. And that's one of the powerful things about psychotherapy and recovery for those of you that are in recovery, is that initially, early recovery, early psychotherapy can be about really looking at our family of origin, our childhood, the way that we were hurt, the traumas we endured, and what it did to us. And when we can grieve in real time, the losses that we've had, that actually heals those losses. It's really quite simple. And then we start to feel more integrated, more whole, and there's a sense of freedom where we're not suffering anymore. And even the Buddhists talk about when the suffering mind drops away, then we're truly free. So notice whether or not you are suffering in your own head. If you are potentially judgmental in your own head or oppressing yourself in your own head, the freedom then is within you, just as the jailer is within you. What's the difference then between freedom and autonomy? The call for freedom in a relationship often confuses it with autonomy, meaning I want my space. And that's another one of the paradoxes in humanity, is that we're wired for attachment. We're wired for connection. I just lost my connection, speaking of connection. So I'm getting a note on my screen saying that I'm going to be reconnected in 1 second. Let's see what happens. I'm just going to try something on my phone because it doesn't look like my phone line was disconnected. Okay, so I don't think you lost we lost a phone connection there, but we did lose an internet connection. I apologize for that. So I was talking about then how we simultaneously long to be connected. We long for attachment. In fact, attachment changes our neurobiology, which you've heard me talk about many times before, that attachment helps us to feel safe, secure, regulated, not so alone. You know that somebody's got your back, that there's somebody in the background, that you're not walking through this world by yourself. And yet, we all want our own space. We know that feeling when we've had too much of our family member, whoever they are, parent, child, lover, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. We just need our space. And a healthy relationship not only requires but allows for this mutual autonomy so that we can go out and grow. And oftentimes in relationships, people get threatened by that kind of personal growth and development. So they hold tight to each other in such a way that neither party really grows. If I want to experiment or try something and you're my partner, you kind of roll your eyes disparagingly, so I don't do it because I feel shame or like it would be too hard. And maybe you do the same thing. There's something that you're into that I don't like, and then I have a judgment about it, which is oppressive again, and then you don't do it, and then you feel resentful, and together we just sit, boringly watching TV and staring into nothingness. And so I really think it's important to challenge ourselves that when our partners bring home an idea of something they want to try that we would never in a million years think was fun or would want to try, that instead we get curious and say, wow, tell me what you like about that, and how do you imagine doing that, and when are you going to do it? And it may mean that they're going to be taking time away from you. And so can you tolerate that separation, that need for autonomy, while you hold on to the relationship, even though that person may be gone for a day or for a weekend, going to a workshop or learning a new skill or something like that. And that's really the balance back and forth. And it's allowing ourselves and each other freedom without judgment, without oppression, without resentment also. And saying, oh yeah, sure, you can go, but I'm just going to sit home and stew all weekend. Or go spend money unnecessarily as a way to get back at you, even though I won't say directly that's what I'm doing. So we do all sorts of things that aren't, above board or in our integrity. So be mindful about that. And this mutual autonomy allows respective voices to be heard and authentic selves to grow without trying to manipulate the other or impose a given outcome. And Shazi says, does this require a secure attachment with couples? And I would say yes. And if you have an insecure attachment, then this is a way to work towards secure attachment. So if my partner says, hey, I want to go do whatever, I want to go learn to surf this weekend, and I would have no desire to do that, and he's going to be gone surfing for a weekend, I can sit there, noticing how anxious I am just because he went away for the weekend, and be curious about, why am I so anxious? Why can't I hold on to the fact that I know that he loves me and he wants to be with me, but he's doing something for his own health and well-being and entertainment and enjoyment, and I didn't want to go anyway. So why am I making him suffer by sitting at home suffering so that he feels guilty? Why don't I pick myself up and go take some yoga classes, or go to a movie with a girlfriend, or spend time maybe with my mother who I've neglected? Do something that is productive, that enhances my own well-being and sense of myself separate and apart from him. People often say, and I'm sure, all of us have said this at one point, that we don't want to lose ourselves to the relationship, or we lose ourselves in relationship, and we lose ourselves because we give up our freedom. It's not because it's being taken away from us, it's because we give it up. We choose not to keep doing the things that we love doing. I meet couples all the time who don't have hobbies anymore, because if they're not joined at the hip, they don't do anything by themselves any longer. And that's really sad, because the things that attract us to another person are the very things we often ask them to give up. And then they're no longer attractive, and we wonder why. And they're not attractive because they're not novel. If my partner were hypothetically to surf all weekend, or I were to go watch him do that, I would think, wow, that's kind of exciting. That's interesting. I didn't know he had that in him. He looks sort of sexy doing that. There's novelty now that I'm experiencing because of his autonomy. It makes me want him more. And this is not a game of, running away, threatening the relationship so that I, quote, want him more at all. It's not that. It's not about pulling at the foundation of the secure functioning of the relationship. It's about enhancing it by being more differentiated, more separate, less emotionally fused, or enmeshed is another word you've probably heard. So by letting each voice be heard, that allows us to grow authentically, because who we are when we get together is very different than who we are today, especially if you've been in a long relationship. So if I got together with my partner when I was, 30, and I'm now, 45, 50, 55, and I haven't done anything to grow myself, why would I expect that person to still find me that attractive? I'm the same person I was. As opposed to them saying, yeah, I really respect my partner. He or she has learned to surf and learned to cook, and wrote a book of poetry or a coloring book, or helped, our niece make it through the 5th grade, whatever it is, whatever the thing may be, that we start to see each other as multidimensional human beings, and we give ourselves and each other the freedom in order to grow without manipulation, or imposing some sort of desired outcome. Any other questions at this point? All right. Well, is freedom a desire or a form of escaping confrontation? When people demand freedom in an agitated way, they might actually screen a desire to escape a frightening confrontation. Now, what does that mean? Um, Requesting freedom, requesting the desire to do something, or expressing the desire that may take us apart from our partner shouldn't be done in a defensive way, wherein I'm saying to you, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to do it whether you like it or not, because I'm so afraid you're going to take it away from me, or I'm already angling for a fight, or I think we're going to fight. And that may be a way for me not to have to confront this in a deeper way. If I tell you that I really, really want to go learn to, dance, and I've never taken dance classes before, and I say it to you in an agitated way, or I tell you I'm going to do it whether you like it or not, and then I run out the door, that's not a very solid, secure way of talking about it. That's sort of a dropping a bomb and running. But if I sit down with you and I know that you don't like dance, or you think it's a waste of time and money, then I'm really going to have to find a solid place in myself and risk you not liking this or being upset or hurt when I sit down with you face to face and say, there's something really important to me I have to talk to you about, and this is what it is. I'm going to start taking dance classes, and not just a class here and there. I really want to pursue ballroom dancing. I want to get really, really good at this. So that means I'm going to be devoting hours of my time and money, and I want to talk about what it is that you don't like about this and what effect this is going to have on you and me together, and how can we work together on this. And maybe we come to a conclusion that I won't be competing in the Olympics, but I'll do it well enough that I feel gratified, and maybe you'll enjoy my delight in doing it, and you'll actually come watch some of my dance recitals. And that's a much more adult way of approaching freedom and a desire for it and a desire to try something new. And here's another question here. I think that's why it's important to encourage couples to talk about their dreams and wishes. Yes, I think, when early on people will talk about dreams and wishes, but as time goes on, sometimes our dreams and wishes and hopes start to slide through our fingers because we're all just so busy and so incredibly beleaguered today. And so what we once dreamt of doing, we just sort of let it go. And in a way, if we really care for each other, we can be the holders of those dreams and wishes and say to our partners, hey, what happened to the fact that you wanted to learn to dance? Doing that anymore? Or why aren't you going horseback riding anymore? Or why aren't you water skiing any longer? That used to be such a fun thing for you to do. Do you imagine yourself doing it again? I really want to support you in doing it again. And I need you to support me in taking up my meditation practice again. And this way, you're on the same side against, the loss of freedom. You're supporting each other with this freedom. So taking coping mechanisms that we learn in childhood, such as time outs, for ourselves if we're agitated, and say, wait a minute, I'm agitated here. I want to tell my partner about this. I'm afraid to tell them because I don't want a confrontation. I think I'm going to wait. I'm going to impose a timeout on myself. Maybe talk to someone else about this, a friend, a sponsor, a trusted other, so I can get clear about how I want to talk about this, so I can return to my partner and talk about it in an adult way. And emotional exile as a parenting style is not necessarily good for children. Children need to develop a need for freedom from people also. So sometimes parents will freeze their kids out or not talk to them in ways that are appropriate, instead of teaching them that it's okay to be by themselves, that they often and also don't always have to be with friends or with adults that they don't have to conform what everybody wants them to do, that they're free to play. And imaginative play and playing is so important for learning, and more that's gotten eradicated from children's lives in our world, really with the advent of electronics and also school budgets not having the money for play, or taking play out of schools and focusing more on standardized testing. So giving children a wide berth for freedom is essential for their growing brains and bodies. And what this does, this sort of emotional exile, is that it can lead to avoidance, withdrawal, fear of intimacy, all of which are the antithesis of freedom. Peter says, my wife's going on holiday with my mother, which means that I'm going to be alone for my holiday time. I'm kind of at a loss to be free to do things by myself. Well, this sounds like a really good opportunity for you to make a list of all the things you've dreamt of doing, or that you gave up on, or that you're curious about. And then while they're gone that week, what if you commit to doing something every day that moves you towards discovering something new? Maybe it's going to a local museum or fair, or going for a hike in the woods, or learning to cook something, taking a cooking class. Sometimes it's a good idea to look for the classes that are in your town. But also, maybe you want to tinker with something or build something, but find something every day. And there's a book called The Artist's Way, which is an old book that maybe many of you have heard of, by Julia Cameron. And it's a really terrific book for unlocking what we've locked up in large part. And one of the exercises in that book is she has people take themselves on an artist date every week. So that means you have to commit to doing something. And that means it can be going to a restaurant you want to try, or going to a museum, like I said, or maybe you heard of some event or some festival or something going on that's in the next town that you want to drive to and check out. But I think for you, Peter, it's really crucial that you make a list of things you want to try, get online or get out the local paper and see what's going on in your area, especially at this time of year because it's springtime and it's warm, and have an adventure. Ask a friend to go with you. Maybe there's even a little weekend destination or workshop you can go do that would be good for you. And I'd look forward to hearing from you about what you concoct and what you can do during that week. And that's a really good example. Now here is someone who's saying, I have all this freedom, I don't know what to do with it. And the danger is of sitting at home and just kind of vegging out and doing nothing for the week. And that is not vital. It's actually more exhausting to the body and the brain because it's different between, tired from a really good day's work or a really good workout versus tired because you're bored. And you're just kind of exhausted from hanging around from one day to the other. So it's important to add vitality and freedom to our lives. So ask yourself whether you are, avoiding in withdrawal, if you're afraid of intimacy, all the ways that you lock your own freedom down, and start to ask yourself, what one thing can you do to start to move out of that withdrawal and isolation? So I think I'm going to take a moment here to open up the lines in case people have a direct question.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So for those attendees who would like to ask a question, you can use your interface to unmute your line, or if you're on the phone, you can press *6.
Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Well, you're a big crowd, but you're awfully quiet. All right, well, I'll continue on. If you think of anything, definitely write a note or ask a question as we go along here. So freedom to relate with unconditional love. Can you imagine what that is like? Because rarely do any of us relate with unconditional love. We're afraid that it's going to mean something or somebody's going to want something from us if we just love unconditionally, because we think that with unconditional love means a collapse of boundaries, and that then cannot feel very free. It can feel constraining again or obligatory. So think about who you love unconditionally and whether you do, and what that means to you. And somebody just asked a question about what is emotional exile? Is it avoidance? And I would say yes. When we exile ourselves emotionally, we are avoiding other people. We're not expressing our feelings. And one of the ways that can be threatening is to go do something with a group of strangers. So if, for example, we'll use Peter for an example, if he said, oh, there's a Sierra Club hike this weekend, I think I'm going to go to that. And it's really uncomfortable because I don't know anybody. They're all strangers. I haven't hiked for a long time. I'm worried I'm going to be the last one, panting up the hill, all those things we think of ourselves. If he were to lean into the challenge of doing that, tolerating the discomfort in order to grow, he would come out so much better than if he were to avoid it and emotionally exile himself from having to interact with other people. And that can become habituated for people over time, leaving us feeling more isolated, more alone, and really less free because we end up feeling stuck as opposed to that we're trying something new and exciting and different. So this forces us to acknowledge and address our personal issues. We want to often imagine that other people or other forces are quelling or squashing our freedom, but it's really us that's doing it to us, unless, of course, you're behind bars. And building relationships on trust and trustworthiness are two good recommendations for becoming freer. Because when you trust somebody, you don't have to think about them. You don't have to worry about them. You don't have to worry about where they're going or what they're doing. And likewise, when you are trustworthy, people around you don't have to second guess what you're up to or worry about you. They can freely go about their lives and do what's best for them and enjoy themselves. So that's a two-way street that takes place there when we can go back and forth in that way. And then there's the freedom to care deeply without fear of rejection or disappointment, which is another feature of unconditional love. If I care deeply about you, if I tell you in effect that I love you, that doesn't obligate me to be even best friends with you. I can love you impersonally because you're a human being and I care about you and I want to see good things happen for you. It doesn't really, it's not going to hurt me one way or the other if that happens, but it is a giving of my sort of psychic awareness to hold you in a consciousness of care, love, and it doesn't matter whether you like me or don't like me or reject what I'm saying or call me a new age crackpot. None of it really matters. And there's a freedom there because if I'm worried about what you think about the love that I give or the information I give, or that you're going to want something back from me or you're going to reject me, then I'm going to shut down and I won't give as freely. And that becomes a constriction of my freedom. So that's not just about, I want to take surfing lessons and you don't want me to. That's about, I'm giving you my heart, I'm giving you my warmth, my love, my compassion, and maybe you want it and maybe you don't. But even if you don't, I'm not going to cut myself off from the giving of it. And finally, freedom to forgive, to feel and to act frees us from our habitual self. And freedom to forgive is a big, big issue. Everyone has the right to forgive or not forgive in their own time. And those of us who have been injured or wounded by anyone on any given day, should say all of us, have the option to forgive or not. But when we don't forgive, then we end up holding all of that pain and suffering ourselves. And that becomes a lack of freedom on our own. We are, again, constricting our freedom if we don't forgive the other. And this is a way that we hold on to the other without truly, truly letting them go. So again, this has paradoxes in it as well, that people don't forgive oftentimes because they're just not ready to. It's too painful. They haven't worked through what happened exactly, so they can't give up the pain that they have. But they hold themselves hostage ultimately. When we don't forgive, we are holding ourselves hostage. We are ruminating. We're obsessing. We have feelings in our body when that person's name is brought up of, oh, I can't stand them, or there's a tightness or a feeling of being ill that is not necessary, and we are free to give that up. So think about today of anyone that you're holding a resentment towards, anybody you're angry at, anyone you feel like has wronged you, and see if it's time to forgive them so you can free yourself. I think you free them energetically also, but ultimately you're the person that you free the most.
Alexandra, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Peter.
Hi, Peter.
I've been working a lot on forgiveness lately. I work in a prison and in the prison kitchen, and the inmates steal various things. And when I catch them stealing, I have to take some action as far as suspending them from the kitchen or charging them or so on. And these actions need to be taken, but I'm finding myself being very rude and almost abusive when I deal with them on a personal level after they've wronged me in that way. So I've had to make almost amends to them that yes, you've done something wrong, but I don't need to speak to you in that manner and abuse you that way. And so I'm working really hard on that forgiveness.
Good. So what is the feeling when somebody steals something from your kitchen and you have to reprimand them? What feeling do you have in your body?
Anger and a feeling of being wronged.
Right. So being taken advantage of?
Yes.
Anything else?
I think there's also some shame involved that I'm not able to catch them before they do this, not being able to do my job to a perfect level.
Right. Okay. So there's lack of compassion there for yourself. Is there any disappointment or feeling of betrayal? Like, oh man, I trusted you.
Very much.
Okay. So I think what it sounds like is happening is that you feel hurt. It's
I do.
I'm giving you an opportunity here. I want to trust you. And boom, you turn around and you do something like this where you violate the trust. Now I have to report you, and I feel like a jerk because, I'm supposed to be watching you and you're not a baby, right? You're behaving like a baby. You're not taking responsibility for yourself. So I understand that it makes you angry and you feel like you've been wronged, but I think also the betrayal is deeper because it cuts to your humanity. Like you want to give these guys a break. If they're working in your kitchen, they've earned a privilege, I would imagine, to work there. And so maybe it's worth a conversation with your staff to say, hey, I care about you guys. It's important that we all set each other up for success here and we don't violate the trust that we have, because I'm going to be bummed out. Not only bummed out, I'm probably going to be pissed off, and you'll know it. And I don't want to treat you poorly. You're already treated poorly. So let's see if we can work together here. It would be worth a try. I don't know how far it would go, but that way you're sort of owning what you want and you're kind of setting up the culture you want in your kitchen, and you're pulling for them. You're saying, I want this. I want you to be successful here. I don't want you to flame out and steal something and then I have to be angry and a jerk. And what do you think about that?
We have them sign a performance contract where they come in where we go over all these points with them. But the culture they live in and the fact that the contraband they get from the kitchen is used as a currency is such a
Sure.
strong pull that it's it's 90% of this, 10% of that, right?
I see. Well, even though they sign the contract, you might give them that talk every morning. You could do it every day and say, I know there's a pull to steal something today. What if you don't do it for today? What if you treated it like you were treating, alcohol, like an addiction? Like for today, can you not steal something from the kitchen? And make it a game or something like that. But I think if you start to come forward more authentically and take charge of what your feelings are and what's going on with them and name it, that might create more of a relationship with everybody. And then you would feel less like you were, being mean or cruel to people that are already struggling. Okay, so
That
thank
sounds
you for
good.
that. And then someone else writes here, would you think it would be, or when do you think it would be appropriate to bring the concept of freedom when we work with couples or individuals? Oh, I meant the concept of forgiveness. Okay. Well, it depends on where the couple is. I mean, if you're talking about a couple where there's been betrayal, then you have to, your timing is really everything. If somebody comes in and they've just discovered their partner was cheating on them, and they're angry and hurt and spinning out, that is not a good time to talk about forgiveness. But if enough time has gone on and the couple has done a significant amount of work, then I think forgiveness is a very useful concept to start talking about, because they have to typically forgive themselves and each other. It's not usually a one-way street where forgiveness is concerned. And just like Peter was saying, if he has to forgive himself, because when you work with criminals, they're going to be manipulative, they're going to steal, and they're really good at it. So if you don't catch them, it's not your fault. And I would say that's true with many addicts I've worked with before. I've had addicts lie to me, untold number of times. And I often feel like, oh, I should have caught that, or I should have been smarter, or I should have seen that coming. But one of my clients said to me once, we're really good liars and manipulators, and there's no way you can see it coming because we're good at hiding it. So I have to forgive myself in those moments and also forgive the person who's done the betraying, whatever it is, because these are habituated patterns that they're in. So to answer your question, Shazi, I think it's really timing is everything when you're talking about couples and forgiveness. So let's see. Freedom to forgive, to feel, and to act frees us from our habitual self. And I think that's true too, because we are a bunch of habituated patterns. It's often difficult to forgive as much as it is difficult to say, hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And I don't even remember what the thing was. It's been so long ago, but I'm sure I did things to hurt you, or I was immature, or I was just thinking about myself. So I just want to say I'm sorry, because I want to unburden myself from holding that, and I want to move on with my life. Whether or not we remain friends or colleagues doesn't matter. At least I got to say what I needed to say, assuming the other person is interested in it. So what does healthy freedom look like to you is one of the questions I'm going to leave you with today. Are you, or maybe you've already thought this, but have you just shifted your thinking a little bit more about this idea that other people keep us from freedom versus we keep ourselves bound and changed and perpetrate cruelty on ourselves by what we say to ourselves? And a question here is saying, do you need to change limiting core beliefs to be free? Well, yes, I would say that these core beliefs often manifest as negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts are a perpetration of violence. So when I talk about self-compassion, or from suffering from a Buddhist perspective, I'm talking about stopping the suffering in our own heads, because there are people that are walking around free, not incarcerated today, who are suffering greatly because of the violence they perpetrate on themselves. And then there are some who are literally imprisoned who have found freedom because they have some sort of practice whether it's a meditation practice or mindfulness or what have you, they have found that really freedom is in their head. It's not whether they're behind a wall or on the other side of a wall. So yes, I think we have to unchain ourselves from our limiting beliefs, our limiting negative thoughts, the cruelty we perpetrate on ourselves, and start to practice self-compassion. And then freedom looks very different. Nobody's doing anything to you. You have unshackled yourself. And do you wear the chains of personal circumstance and obligation? Guilt is another barrier to freedom. And guilt is really in our heads. We tell ourselves that we should or we shouldn't, or that we're obligated, or if we don't do this or that, our parents are going to have problems here or there. And if you really look at the people that you feel guilty about not taking care of, unless, of course, they're children or they're dependents in some ways or innocent in some ways, then you really have to ask yourself, is it true that if I didn't go do that thing today, that person would fall apart or their life would suffer or some other horrible thing would happen? Or am I really shackling myself because I tell myself that because I feel so personally obligated? And where did that obligation first come into play? And who created the obligation? And how much do you perpetrate the obligation? So if you think about one obligation today or this week and say, what if I weren't obligated to that? What if I didn't do that thing? And it's not about dumping your responsibility at the last minute, but it's about maybe calling somebody, 2-3 days ahead of time and say, hey, you know what, I'm actually not going to make that. I said I was going to, and I've over-obligated myself, and I'm not going to do it today. And see what it feels like to say that, to have that freedom, and to have that time back. And then you have to reflect and ask yourself if that obligation is something you need to keep up and if you're doing it for the right reasons. Sometimes people are so over-scheduled and so over-obligated because they have good intentions, but you can't do everything. You can't run your kids back and forth to school, have a job, volunteer for whatever the most pressing political problem is today, and do everything else you do. So just see where you're overextended and perhaps over-obligated. And let yourself get rid of the chains of obligation and embrace what it means to be free in all of your interactions and your activities. Do them because you want to, because you're called to do them, because they bring joy and an openness into your life, a feeling of openness or space or relief in the body, as opposed to constriction or guilt or obligation. And reflect on any desire to escape life, people, and situations. I don't know about you, but this can be a very big fantasy for me, that I'm going to be free when I graduate to something else, go someplace else, find something else, that my freedom is waiting somewhere on vacation for me. And I would have to live on vacation if I really wanted to be free, which is unrealistic. So I have to check those fantasies about I'll feel free internally at another time. And really what it means is that if I'm overly burdened, if I'm too stressed out, I'm feeling a lack of freedom. And that's on me to say, I need to stop. I need to take less obligations. I need to take an afternoon off and do something for myself. And then ask yourself, what would need to happen for you to feel free to move towards something else, to move towards whatever them is, a friend, a partner, an activity you've been wanting to follow through on in your life. So does anybody have any questions about this topic now or anything that I've said?
Alexandra?
Yes.
I would like to say, first of all, that I really like this open mic format because I don't type so well.
Right,
so
I understand.
I appreciate that. And I would say the biggest thing in my recovery is having the freedom to to have the courage to love others and extend myself in relationships, um, that, which primarily happened within the 12-step format, and also with my wife.
That's nice. So I think, yes, we learn about freedom to love and freedom in relationships. There are no books for this. There's no other place to do this other than to do it in real time with real people. So with you especially, it's really lovely to have had the privilege of watching your progress over time and seeing how connecting with other people has helped you so greatly. And so it's nice to know you're out there spreading the love and freedom yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, so finally, I'll wrap this up by saying thank you for joining me today and remind you that Mirror of Intimacy is always on sale on Amazon, and that anytime you want to write a review for us, we always appreciate your time and energy. And I met a woman this week who told me she bought 10 copies of this book to give to all of her friends because she loves it so much. And oftentimes people tell me that they buy them to give them, just to be able to hand it out to people. They enjoy it so much. So thank you all for your readership and for your support. And I look forward to seeing you in May. In the meantime, I hope you have a beautiful April and a happy spring. Thank you.
Alex, if you have time, there's one question that showed up in my feed that did not get through to yours. It's from Louise R., and she asks, how do we find balance of compassion, of freedom when living with a newly diagnosed sex addict, i.e. making sure our actions are not codependent?
Well, I think that goes back to, there's an adage in the 12-step program that's highly paradoxical called staying on your side of the street. And that means you really have to look at yourself, what you want, what you need, and you have to find your own personal freedom within what's happening in the circumstances of your life. So it doesn't matter if this person is a sex addict or your house just burned down, or some other tragedy has befallen you, or, let's say a parent just died. You have to be able to tolerate the paradox of suffering and pain and grief and loss, and at the same time say, where am I in this maelstrom? What do I have to do to make myself feel better? And maybe it's just moments of freedom, Louise. Maybe it's not, freedom in this large way that I've been talking about, but moments during your day where you take a deep breath, you close your eyes and you say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. This is going to be okay. And for now, I have to do what I need to do to tend to myself, because I know for females especially, they can, feel just exhausted by the acute stress they're under. They can have difficulty sleeping or sleeping too much, or eating, overeating, or not eating, or drinking too much. And so you want to be careful about your basic self-care, so that you're eating well, sleeping, getting some exercise, taking a hot bath, going for walks, talking to friends, and tending to yourself first and foremost, and the rest will unfold naturally. All right. So I think that then does do it for today. So thank you again, and I hope you have a good month, and see you in May. Bye-bye.
Bye.